So, Cody, I was hanging out with a group of friends last night, and an interesting topic came up that I figured we could talk about today. Kind of an interesting, thought-provoking area. But I don't know how it started, but basically somebody asked the question or brought it up about like, that seems rich, like only rich people have that, you know? Mm-hmm. And so we kind of got in this group discussion of what does rich mean to you? And then we also talked about a little bit of like, you know, what your perception of rich was when you were a kid. And so I thought that could be something, you know, kind of fun for us to talk about, you know, today, what we view as like, you know, what do only rich people have, or what's kind of the status symbol of that? But starting out, what did you think as a kid? Like, if you saw somebody have this or do this, you're like, oh, they're rich for sure. Like,
right.
Either kid, teenager, whatever you want to say. Like, what would have been your like status things of, man, that person is rich?
Nintendo 64.
That was a big one. Or just video games in general. You know? Yeah,
if you had Nintendo 64, your parents were rich. And we didn't know if your parents were rich. We just knew you had a Nintendo 64, not we didn't. I mean, as a kid, like, I also think of seeing, you know, Batman, Bruce Wayne, you know, all the stuff he could do, like being a superhero. You know, that's rich. Cool cars, like Lamborghini, stuff like that. You know, I would see as rich, but definitely video game systems, which is interesting now because like now I could look at a game system and be like, oh, I can afford that. But as a kid, you were like, I don't know how I'm going to get a PlayStation 2. This is insane. Yeah. I gotta mow 30 lawns and do it like 4 years, and I might can afford the video game.
Right.
Know?
Yeah. So. It was so out of reach. So if you had a friend, you know, that had one, it was, you know, it was crazy. I'd say for me, like, you always had that friend that had a really nice house, and you're like, oh, their parents are rich for sure. Or like,
yeah.
For us, a house with a pool was a big deal. Like a nice pool, like in ground, you know, like in the ground pool. You know, you were pretty well off. If you had nice cars, that was a big one. One that somebody brought up last night was funny. Of like, you go over to a friend's house, and if they have like canned soda, like just cans of soda in their fridge, or like the second fridge, like in the garage or something, that's just drinks. It's like, man, those people are rich if they can have that. Because it's like not something that we had a lot of, you know, growing up. We just didn't have that kind of stuff in the house. And I'm, you know, assumes similar for a lot of other people. So if you had a friend that, you know, that had the video games, that had the soda or whatever, had the pool, it was always like, oh man, they are really well off. Another one is like, if we, you know, your friend used to brag about like going out to eat, like that was something we didn't do a ton. So if it's like, oh yeah, we went out to eat, you know, to this place or this place, it's like, man, they must be rich. Right. Or, you know, if they didn't have to second guess getting guac at Chipotle, you know, like as a teenager, you're like, well, I need to contemplate my life in this Chipotle line. Like, can I afford this guac? So there's people like, oh yeah, guac. It's like, oh wow, like no second guessing it at all.
No hesitation.
Like, yeah, I hesitate now, even then. You know, so but as a kid, it's like, oh man, they just got that, and or just even going out to eat in general, that was like the status symbol for it.
Yeah.
And then as you mentioned, like the you know, the basic things of if they had a nice car, you know, if somebody's dad had a nice car, I was like, wow, they must be, you know, really rich to be able to afford that car. Anything else that comes to mind?
Having a TV in your room.
Oh, forgot about that. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
That was a really big deal.
I mean, we never really had a big TV until, I mean, nowadays big TVs are typical and, you know, really cheap.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're talking like, I grew up watching on I don't know what this is. I mean, I know it was square, you know, and you
about the size
weighed
of a
like
monitor
12
now.
tons.
Yeah.
You know, you were afraid like the desk or whatever you're putting it on is about to break from under it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would play video games on that and everything. But like, I had friends that had TVs in their room, and you're like, what is this? Like, you're playing Xbox in your room? Like, I couldn't fathom that.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, you were rich if you could just yell at your parents and say, "Hey, can I play video games?" And they're like, "Yeah," and then you just go to your room and play. For me, it was like I had to wait for like the Game Show Network to be over, so like mom's not watching it, and then I have to like wait for Barney to be off because that's what my sister's gonna watch between 3 and 4 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then like, oh, I finally got my time. It's like 7 to 8 o'clock. It's like, this is my time. Yeah. And then of course Dad gets home. He's like, I'm gonna watch the news or something. I'm like, dang it. So I got Fox News instead of my Mario Kart or whatever it is. So
that's true. I forgot about that. That was a big deal if you had a friend or anybody you knew that had a TV in their room. That was a big deal. And then it sounds funny saying it now, but like you'd have those friends that have phones or like smartphones. Like it is kind of crazy that was not too long ago when that was not the norm for everyone just to have a smartphone. But I remember that it used to be a big deal when friends had a smartphone versus the or even just having an iPod. Wait, you remember the iPod Touch came out?
Yes,
that was really nice because all before that, we had, like a shuffle or, I think the Nanos even came out. And so if you had that, the iPod Touch, like that was, you were rich. That, that was the
I remember when we were going off to, you and I were going to a convention and we had our flip phones.
Yes.
And, because our parents needed us to have a phone so we can stay in touch. But your sister was going on that trip too, and she had one of the first droids, and she had Angry Birds on that sucker. And you and I like played that nonstop. We had her phone longer than she did, and we're like, "Oh, you're rich. You have like Angry Birds on your phone. Like this doesn't make sense to me. Like the only game I had was like Snake or whatever it is.
Yes, yeah, that's the only one. Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah, I do remember that. Anybody that could have games and different kind of apps, on their phone, that would be a big deal. So anyway, we can reminisce all the time, but I thought that would be interesting to say. And then let's pivot to now. Like, what do you think, rich means now? And has your perspective changed? Hopefully a lot on the smartphone stuff, but maybe about like, everything else. Has your perspective really changed since then? And what kind of has changed that? So I guess we'll start out with, what for you now, when you hear or see, like what defines somebody's being rich? Like what would you say kind of shows that to you? Like, oh, that person's rich.
Right. I mean, like if I'm thinking in my neighborhood or general people that I know versus like the uber rich, we think of Jeff Bezos in a rocket, like that's rich, right?
Right.
I mean, that's kind of the top. I think he's officially the richest guy in the world.
That's peaked. Yeah. You're peak rich then. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the Tony Stark and Bruce Wayne right there.
Yes.
But in just kind of rich to me, definitely people that still don't hesitate to get guac, I
mean, that is the highest level. Like you got Bezos and then you got don't hesitate getting guac. Like that is right up there with the wealth
I'm
standard.
Still like, okay, I go to Dunkin' Donuts the other day and, I can't have dairy. So I'm like, all right, I need almond milk. And they're like, that's an extra $1. I'm like, oh, what? $1? That used to be
I'll
like
just die.
30 cents. Yeah. So now I'm like, I'm just drinking black coffee because I'm not going to pay the extra $1.
Or you're just going to get regular milk and you don't care.
Yeah. I mean, we're still to a point like my wife was like, honey, look, you can get a venti at Starbucks. I'm like, those are expensive. She's like, no, iced coffee. Like, get a venti iced coffee. Ask them for the plain syrup. Don't get any almond milk, and then ask for an extra cup, and I'll pour half of mine into yours, and then we have 2 drinks. I'm like, we're figuring this out. And I'm like, wow, we're still okay.
Trying to make it work. That's hilarious.
And we do it too, and it's awesome.
Bucks. Yeah.
It actually works.
Okay.
And then you can ask for like the mocha sauce. It's really good. But anyway, people that just walk into Starbucks and say whatever jibber jabber, and they just come out with this crazy drink and they don't even hesitate, or the people that can like pay for it on their phones. Like I know I can do that. I don't know why it's so rich to be able to like just boop your phone or your watch,
It's a boss move. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still like putting my chip in because it doesn't have the RFID thing or whatever it is. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Like one thing so this is something I just thought of. Like, I don't think of somebody as rich for doing this because I know a lot of broke people that do this. But like ordering like food delivery like is such a power move. Like it's so expensive. Like you're paying $15 for a $3 meal or whatever, the whatever you're getting is actually $3 and then you're paying $15 total just to have it delivered to you. But it's such a power move, but it's not like I see somebody doing that and like, oh, they're rich, because
right.
I know in my apartment complex,
Postmates every day. Yeah, exactly. That's rich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that. Trying to think.
Yeah, like if I see somebody in a Tesla, I think that's rich.
Still kind of, that's a status thing. I feel like
I was in Men's Warehouse because I'm in my brother-in-law's wedding in the next couple months, and so we're like picking up the suit that I'm supposed to get. And the guy that was dressed there, he was like dressed really nice. And I mean, I'm about to look pretty snazzy in this new suit, but I mean, it was like $250. That's not too bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
I still had to save up for it and everything. But to think like people have tons of these like suits and they like wear them every day. Like, yeah, I know you don't have to be rich to look really nice, but like I see that as rich. Like the guy that worked there, like he had to have $1 million in my mind. Like that dude was $1 million. Like he was
at least he looked
to
like
the nines.
it.
He had the cufflinks. I'm like, this guy's got to be a millionaire. He's probably in like huge amounts of debt, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, he's working at Men's Warehouse, so like, at what point are you in the status chain?
It's like I look great, but I'm paying my student loans.
Yeah, that's fair. When we were talking about it last night with some friends, like a lot of people brought up, if you've got all like, you're decked out in the Apple gear. So if you've got the AirPods, if you got the Apple Watch, like that's kind of like at least it used to be, a few years ago, kind of a status thing. Did mention the Tesla. That's kind of the thing. But I think one thing that's changed for me as, I've gotten older is I kind of see the fakeness behind some of it, where a lot of people are like fake rich. So I can kind of see that a little bit. Because like as a kid, you wouldn't necessarily put it all together. So like you'd have, you got that friend that's living in a trailer, but their dad drives a Mustang, and it's like, you don't quite put it all together. You're like, oh, wow, they drive a Mustang. That's all you focus on, when you realize it's like, maybe not. I mean, I don't know.
Right.
I don't want to say, but a lot of people, sometimes people can very easily put on a front, buy the Tesla that barely runs and like they're super in debt trying to pay for it, but they got a Tesla. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think, people can kind of put that up pretty quick. I'm trying to think what else for me. I still think, big house usually is thing that kind of sets it off. Cause I realize, car, you could somewhat make it work and get a nice car, even if you can't truly, afford it, through, some different means. But I still feel like, a big house. And then also like now seeing people go on trips, that's a big thing. Like, I'm just like, man, you could do that. Like, seems rich. Right. And so that's another thing that I would add, to that. It's like, you see like people going on trips. Yeah.
Going to the beach all the time. Yeah. Maybe like a beach house. So that, I kind of think that is like rich. That's something I would like love to have as like a vacation home. Like I can't imagine that, but, when we go like little trips, we get hit up VRBO. I'm like, this is somebody's house and this is really nice. I would love to have this,
Yeah, that's
so
true.
yeah, definitely people that have VRBOs, unless it's, a company, but like privately owned VRBOs like that. Yeah, that's rich in my mind.
I would count that. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would consider one home wealthy. So if you got two or more, like that's you're doing pretty good. So that's interesting.
It's weird how like our definition of rich, because like when we see that, we're like, oh, this is rich, but like technically, they could just put down a small down payment and have a huge like mortgage loan on it, and the VRBO is paying the mortgage, and so they may not be rich, but it's just weird how like we see that and we're like, oh, they're rich because what they have.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's interesting too. Like, I think if you asked, 10 people what rich meant to them, I don't think you get 10 different answers, but I think you get quite a few different. So I think rich is relative to each person, which I think is really interesting. Because we think we have the same standards of rich, but really when you get down to asking somebody like, is it in having a certain dollar amount in your bank? Is it things you own, stuff you get to do? So I think we can kind of each one of us has something that we define as rich. And so I think it's kind of interesting that it's not all the same.
Right.
You know, some of the things you said that, you know, you kind of look at as rich, I'm like, well, maybe, you know, but it's each one of us kind of has our, you know, our own individual perspective of that. And so I think that is kind of cool, you know, with what it means. So any other thoughts on that? Or maybe what now are you like, well, that you maybe I used to think somebody's rich if they have that, but now it's like, I kind of,
Yeah.
no, not.
I mean,
Not
studying
really.
finance now, as much as we have, my whole perspective of what rich means is, I mean, I don't even really have the goal of being rich. You know, I want to build wealth and I want to be financially free. But the idea of rich is like definitely changed, because now I think more in dollar amounts, and I think more of net worth. I think more of, you know, assets versus liabilities, things like that, where other people, they probably don't see that. And so if you got a good credit score, you got a nice Camaro, you got a nice house, but you really don't have any cash in the bank, like people may still see that as rich. You know, some people may see their salary as rich, you know, like,
Right.
oh, I make 100K plus a year, so I'm rich.
That's
you
true.
know, or 250 or whatever it is. Some people may say, like, you know, I live in northern parts of Georgia. So if somebody told me I live in Atlanta, the cost of living is a lot more. It's almost double where I am in Atlanta. So I would say, oh, that must be rich. But then to them, somebody said, I live in New York. Well, whoa, you know, like
Right.
you must be rich, but like they could be making 500,000 a year and barely paying the bills, you know? So
Yeah, that's true.
it really just varies. So to me, it's more about like what assets I have, you know, what I own relative to where I'm living and what kind of lifestyle I have.
Right.
And so,
Okay.
you know, I am more focusing on financial freedom and retirement more so than just, you know, what is rich. But I was curious about that when we were thinking about the topic of what does rich mean. So I did do a little digging. And CNBC had an article saying that on average, most Americans, or actually maybe everybody in the world, think that rich in a money standpoint, from a net worth standpoint, is about 1.9 million. So if you want to kind of put a number on it, I don't know how they found that, but you know, rich as far as money, but like what we've been talking, rich could mean really anything to whoever you're talking to.
Yeah. So that's true. I mean, if you want to put a dollar amount on it, you know, I guess consensus, they would say about 2 million. I don't know what I would say, you know, with my number. I think it depends on where you're at. You know, as you mentioned, where you're living. And that, as a side note, that also was a status thing that I forgot to mention, but like what part of town your family lived, you know, like you could live in the same house as somebody else, but if you were in that town or, you know, that neighborhood, like, oh, you know, it's totally different, when really it's the same value house. Like it's the same thing. It's just we add more weight to it if it's from a certain name or, you know, something like that. So I think that's also, you know, an interesting thing to put.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I was going to ask as a follow-up question, like, would your goal be to become rich? And I think you kind of answered that. And I would echo your thoughts that, you know, if I really, you know, think about it, my goal is not to become rich. Just being honest. I know we talk about money and that's, you know, in finances, and that's a lot of times what people's goal is. But for me, I don't want to get to the end of my life and say I was rich. Like, what's the point? I'm being dead on. Like, sure, you could buy cool stuff. But for me, money is a means to an end. That's all it is for me. So I think sometimes when we talk about rich, and even the things that you and I talked about of like what we think, like what it may, you know, means for somebody to be rich, it's usually off of just, you know, dollar amounts that they have, you know, instead of maybe what they can actually do with it. So it's more the status side of it of, oh, they can, you know, they have this. And a lot of times people are really in debt just to get that, or they're pretty much drowning in their finances, just trying to, you know, keep up with all the payments that they have to maintain that lifestyle. But I guess for me, I don't necessarily want to get to the end of my life and say I achieve some dollar amount of saving, or, you know, I was so much net worth. It's more for me, what do I want to do, and then, how can money and controlling money and, handling it wisely get me to that goal. So like one way to think about it is, we talk about financial independence a lot. It's basically not having to worry about money. So you can do whatever you want, regardless of if it pays or how much it pays or if it pays at all. You could just follow your passion. You could sit and do nothing, or you could, travel the world. You could do whatever you want to do. You don't have to worry about money. So for me, that number is what I'm more worried about than what someone may say is rich. So for instance, I'm just throwing out a number, it may change, but let's just say my financial independence number was like $1 million. Just throwing that out there. It seems like a lot of money. So for one person, they'd say, oh, that's rich. And then according to your, article that you just mentioned, a lot of people would say, oh, that's about half as much as you need to actually be rich. Right. You know what I mean? So for me, I don't care if I'm rich or not, or what somebody thinks is rich. I care, did I get to my goal? Was I able to achieve financial independence and be financially free and do what I want? Because in the end, the goal was never the money. You know what I mean? The goal was never to get that dollar amount just to say I have that dollar amount. The goal was being financially free. So whatever dollar amount gets me there, that's what I want to get to. Right. But I'm not sitting there thinking like, oh, I have to have this amount of money and then I'll be satisfied. Because I don't think you're gonna ever be satisfied with that approach. Right. So I'm kind of rambling a little bit there, but basically, my goal is not to be rich. I don't see that as a goal. I think money is just a tool. And sometimes we get jealous of what other people have and stuff. But for me, it's all about what money can get you. It can get you freedom. Right. And so that's the thing that, if you can buy your time back, which is really what's I value and want to focus on. And then there's a lot of good things you could do with money other than just spending it. You can give it away. You can invest in, you can invest in others, and you can really help out, things as well. So I kind of rambled on. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I'm very similar. I want to be financially free. I want to have that financial independence. However, if I become rich in the process, I'm not going to be upset by it.
That's
and fair. I wouldn't say that my goal, I could have, like, sometimes I set goals as like, I'd like to hit that point and I would like to shoot for it. But even if I didn't make it, I'm still going to be satisfied with the effort and time that I put into. So I kind of put a goal to be like, oh, I'd like to be wealthy, to be able to give, to be able to do all these things. But if I just reach financial independence, or I reach that number you talk about, that maybe it's the million, or maybe it's 700,000, or maybe it is 2 million for me, whatever that the number is. I actually need to check on what that number is.
Right.
But if I hit that, then I'm okay. Like, that's the number I need to hit. That's, I absolutely need to get there. It's not really a goal. It's more of a necessity to me. This is something that needs to be reached. But then I could say, well, what I could try to go beyond. Maybe I'm blessed in a way that I bring in a little bit more income. I can invest a little bit more, and then I can, go beyond what that number is. So I would say that I have a goal to, or a desire and a goal to be rich, but I am not going to be hurt or upset or anything if I do not achieve it. If life hands me a crappy hand and I'm dealt, the worst hand ever, but I'm still able to reach that number that I need to be financially independent, to retire, to live a financially free life, then I'm good. I'm 100% okay.
Okay.
So
that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, and then the other thing is, like, it all depends on, like, you may say, hey, I made it, I'm rich. And then someone else is like, no, you're not. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think the whole thing is relative, as we mentioned before. Like, so even saying, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's a moving target of what rich, because you may think it means something, someone else may think it's something else. So that's what I was saying. Like, it's not really the thing I'm shooting for, because I don't think you're ever going to be able to make it, because I think standards are going to change. Someone else is going to think something different. And I don't think it's a worthy, I don't think it's a worthy goal. I don't want to spend my life just to be, quote, rich. Do you know what I mean? Right. Like, it's, I have a lot of other things that I'd rather focus on and be a part of. And there's a story I just thought of, related to this, and I can't take credit for it. I heard it from somebody else, or some article or something. I don't remember where I heard it. So forgive me if I mess it up. But there was this guy who basically just lived his day. He would go out, kind of relax in the morning, and then he would go out fishing, and he would kind of fish most of the day, just relax, catch his fish for the day, and then spend the rest of the day with his family, and they would kind of eat that fish. And then you maybe sell some of the extra ones just to provide for some of the other needs. And that's how he would wake up every day and just spend the new day, fish, see what he could get, and then relax with his family and enjoy the time there. And then a foreigner kind of came, some, executive CEO guy. And he kind of was watching this guy, and how he lived. And he decided to eventually talk with him. And he was like, hey, I see, are you just catching your fish for the day? You're not doing anything else? He's like, yeah, that's all I need. There's enough for my family to eat and a little bit to sell and we live off of. And he was like, well, you could really, streamline this and make this into, a business that could make you a lot of money. He's like, oh, really? Like, okay, what should I do? And he was like, well, you can, start if you spend, get up really early and fish all day, and then maybe even hire on a few other fishermen to go out with you. You can collect a lot of fish, make a lot of money. From that, he's like, okay, what would be the next thing? Well, then you could maybe buy some different boats, kind of have a crew of sorts, maybe get some bigger boats, and you can make, catch even more fish and sell it and make even more money. And then maybe you could even grow to like different locations, or maybe even have like a distribution of your fish and send it all over the world, and you can kind of grow this empire. And the guy was like, okay, that's cool. So what would I do next? He's like, well, you could run that thing for 30, 40 years. And then eventually, maybe it gets to a place when you're in your 60s, where you can step away and have, really enjoy the fruits of your labor. And the guy's like, oh, that sounds like, really cool. What would you recommend doing, And the guy says, well, if I was you, you could just kind of relax. You could just spend your day how you wanted. You could go out fishing, just for fun. You could spend time with your family and just kind of live, an everyday. And so like that analogy, and I remember hearing that story, and it may not be the perfect scenario for every one of us, but it's like, what's your goal lifestyle like that you actually want to live? And so for that guy, he was living it then. Like he didn't need to become rich to then live the lifestyle the way he wanted to. So I think, the point wasn't to get rich. I think if his goal was maybe, as you mentioned, maybe a byproduct of that, then maybe that's worthy, but I don't want to just do it for the sake of doing it. Right. I want to try to be on purpose in why I do it. So if I can get to it without being quote unquote rich, then I'm fine with that. I'm fine getting to the way I want to live. And the freedoms I want to enjoy. And I'm okay if nobody labels me as rich. Right. Because I just want to live, you know what I mean? I'm not focused on that. Does that make sense?
That's a great story.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like, just the other day I was giving, estimates, or quotes for other customers. And I went to one house, and how you just kind of, as a sales guy, you kind of look at it and you're kind of like figuring out, it's like, okay, these people may have money, they may not, you kind of look at the car, you look at the house. And this was not the greatest in the neighborhood. It was not the greatest house. Definitely was not the greatest car. And, but come to find out as I'm doing all this in my head, trying to figure out, this guy is like retired. He is living his life. He is having a blast. I think he was just sitting on the porch watching Andy Griffith and smoking a cigarette, and he was having the time of his life. And I'm thinking, that guy's happy, and here I am judging him because he's not rich or he's not whatever, but he's probably retired. And he has everything he needs in his life. He has the needs enough to fit the lifestyle that he wants to live. And so, that's interesting how, you don't have to be rich to live the life you want. Mm-hmm. You may have to, depending on that life, that goal that you have. But, yeah. I like that story. That's really good.
Yeah, that's good. So, I don't know where we're at on time, but let's get into the, a very stereotypical portion of the Will and Cody show where you hear something you probably heard, a bunch of times. But we're going to say it. You may not have heard it from us, but I would say, thoughts that come to mind as well is it's not all about money. And I know that's very, I don't know what the word would be. I don't know if it's stereotypical, but I don't think you should have your one pursuit being money. So for me, I value family. I value, friends. I value my time, and I kind of want to go do stuff. That'd be a lot of fun. Just be able to do stuff with my family. So that's what I'm going to focus on. So I don't want to get so focused on getting money that I miss out on what I have now. And again, I know how that sounds, pretty basic, but it's so true. I don't want to get blinded in the pursuit of being rich that I miss out on the things that I really wanted. And I know some people that, kind of have taken a vow of they don't really want to be rich and they want to give as much as they can. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think if you're being wise in how you're handling it, maybe you don't want to accumulate a ton of wealth. And so they're going to give, whatever they above what they need and, expect to need in the future, they're just going to give it away. And I think that is totally admirable. And fine if that's, the way you want to live. So I'd say just, the accumulation of money is no way to live your life. I think you got to focus on, again, what money can do, and what you want to do. And if money can help you get there, then okay, let's get to that end. But I think it's just that money is just a means. That's it.
Yeah.
So again, like it may sound nice to say, oh, I think so-and-so is rich, or something, or just by the way they live, they're rich. But I'd say my goal is just to live how I want and focus on the things I want to focus on, regardless of if somebody thinks it's rich.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
And I think that's a good mindset to keep is think of money as a tool. Stop focusing on just accumulating money, just pooling money and not doing anything with it. Money's the tool to help you get to what your true goals are. And then I would also check up on what those goals are. Are they admirable?
Yeah.
Are they good goals to have? Because you could say, I want to have a lot of money so I can buy a really big house.
Fair.
That's a goal. And you're using money as a tool, but what was the point of the big house? Right.
Yeah.
Now you may say, well, I want to get a lot of money so I can give it all away. Okay. That seems more admirable. And so focus on the fact that money is the tool for what those goals are. And I think if we keep that mindset, then we'll kind of be able to push away that temptation of just accumulating money, like you were saying. So that's where I go back to, no matter what you define rich as, my goal will never just to be just to be rich. Like, right. That's not just my goal. And so again, whatever wealth can get me to that I want, that's what I want to focus on. And I want to be, I want to be abundant in everything that I do. I want to have extra that I can, give and enjoy. But that's not where my focus is at. It's just more and more and more and more and more, because you're never going to be satisfied with that. It'll be nice to have those things. It'll nice to be kind of have the status symbol things. But if that's all your worth and your life is focused in, I think you're going to come to the end and it's going to feel kind of empty. That's the deep thought of the podcast. So as I mentioned, I know it's probably basic and, stuff you probably hear in a novel all the time, or, some self-help book, but I think it's, I think it's true. I think you got to get your priorities set. And for me, rich is not a priority. Yeah. That's good. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. So, guys, if you enjoy it, please go on our website. Let us know about it. We've got a contact us page. Ask us questions. Let us know what you thought rich was as a kid. I'd be curious to hear what was getting guac. Is that rich? Nintendo 64, having a TV in your room. I'm just curious what other people's perspectives are on what rich was as a kid, and then what does rich mean to you now. So we'd like to hear about that and see what you guys think. So go on our website, www.willandcody.com. just check that out, or on social media as well. And then also follow this wherever you are listening to our podcast. Share it with others, help spread the word. And we'll see you guys next time.
See you guys.